as we've touched on before, in order for the emerging technologies of today to enact real transformation in our culture, the way we approach and interact with goods and services itself needs to change. And it is, slowly. And while many of our technologies are forcing us and enabling us to reimagine how we interact with our world, whether that's delivery services, automation, or any one of a number of other innovations, some technologies are cutting to the chase. A great example of this is the miniature factory, the portable factory. This is not a newly conceived concept, but it is one that is only now really becoming a practical reality. Recently, Unilever has come out with a plan to institute what they call nano factories, although nanotechnology is not used in its manufacture. But these are factories which can fit inside a shipping container and travel just about anywhere and create an automated production line for, in theory, a variety of products. Currently, the use case is very limited in scope, but the concept is widely applicable. By supplanting, to some degree, large, more centralized factories with smaller, slightly less efficient, but more distributed factories, a higher degree of adaptability, customization, and ad hoc manufacturing can be conducted. But why does this change so significantly how we interact with the world? Well, to some degree, the individual consumer is very much reliant on the guesses and decisions made by the large manufacturers and the companies which request products to be manufactured. There is an ongoing, constant guessing game of sorts regarding supply and demand, what products are needed, how to scale purchase of raw materials, and creation and distribution of certain products in order to keep the pipeline moving of product and not create any bottlenecks or gaps. And this is a very tricky process. And it also removes naturally from the end consumer some degree of control over how products reach them. They are dependent on the manufacturing process and the decisions made therein. Most of the time, this works out just fine. A lot of time and effort is spent by many companies to make sure that the right products are available in the right places at the right times, and in its part, that the manufacture of those products goes as expected and is needed. And in large part, this is very beneficial. Otherwise, every individual would need to create from scratch all the items they need. Obviously, large-scale manufacturing has been a major component of industrialization and has allowed technology to increase decade over decade and even century over century. And without detracting at all from these benefits, there yet are other benefits to be had in the decentralization and miniaturization of the automated or semi-automated manufacturing process. This works in some ways very comparably to how decentralized networks or decentralized computational systems work, in the sense that a given node, a spot, a location, will know best what resources it needs and what the demands are in that locale, and can quickly and efficiently and with little waste answer that need. Whereas for the question and response to go all the way up the chain and all the way down the chain, in practice, can be very inefficient. And while certain items work best at very large scale, especially items which are known to be needed in very large quantities, when it comes to more variable items, this ad hoc process can be much more effective than to places which are very rural, very out of the way, may have difficulty being in the supply lines, will also gain by having this kind of manufacturing facility available. Now, none of this is currently the reality, but the opening up of this new frontier, you might say, of having the potential of these small-scale manufacturing facilities, which can be easily moved, easily distributed, marks the beginning of this change in manufacturing. It's much easier, in a sense, to go from the bare beginnings of something to full-fledged use than it is to go from nothing at all to the bare beginnings. The difference between the Wright Flyer and no airplane was, in a sense, much more vast than the difference between the Wright Flyer and a Boeing Dreamliner. While quantitatively you could say that the difference is greater in the latter case, the existence, the potential created by showing and demonstrating that this is possible and that we can do this in reality, and starting that path off is much more transformational than the next incremental steps, no matter how amazing they are. And it's like that here too. In the next few coming years, we may only see small-scale implementation of this kind of nanofactory, small-scale distributed manufacturing. It may only have a marginal impact on cost and distribution for most people, but it opens up a new potential for manufacturing overall, for how we look at the production of goods, that rather than a top-down manufacturing process dictated in a sense by bottom-up needs, we will instead have a much more flexible, much more fluid and organic call and answer process for manufacturing, which will let the individual consumer get what they need faster and with less waste, which will let the companies themselves respond to that need much more organically and with more automation, since there's less planning involved if the actions of the consumers themselves to some extent dictate what is being manufactured almost automatically. Imagine, for example, when you go and buy a product from a local vendor, this is applicable to certain kinds of products more than others, but the act of buying that product tallies another number that says that this kind of product is consumed this much in this area, this locale. The local warehouse will need to stock this much of it, and so the local manufacturing facility will be able to respond to that need very quickly, knowing and predicting how many of that item will be needed in the near future based on the very hyper-focused population of that area, whether that's a small rural town or a single apartment building in Manhattan. And the distributed small manufacturing facility can produce the goods specifically dictated by that subset of people without having to go through the winding process back up and down to resolve that need with the company's full supply chain. This will make it easier for the company to produce things efficiently and get them to people efficiently, and it will benefit the end user, the consumer, in being able to get what they need when they need it. Things will always be available, but there will much more rarely be things just lying around wasted. Our very view of goods can then begin to change. Items are always available when we need them. We don't have to think about it. Need and necessity are that much more easily satisfied, which makes it easier to not have to worry about satisfying your basic needs, which removes stress from the mind and work that you would otherwise need to do to go out and make sure that you have the items you need. Certainly, in cases of emergency, this would be extremely useful. When supply chains struggle to deliver, the local automation process would be that much more effective at reaching its audiences. Of course, the manufacturing facilities still need their own supplies, but the relative needs are much smaller. And so you end up with a populace that is much more comfortable living their lives without concern over having what they need to live their life. Of course, this is just one aspect of that larger goal. There are still monetary aspects involved, but this is a major step in that direction. And while that future is still fairly far away, this is a great step in that direction. Building a more flexible, dynamic, distributed, and automated manufacturing system that can respond much more directly to the needs of the user, the consumer, is a start towards creating a much more futuristic and effective way of how we approach the stuff in our lives.